John, do you recall when we sat down together and we spoke about the priorities of a survival situation? Do you recall that?
Yes.
What was one of the priorities? You remember?
One of the priorities was shelter,
Yeah.
and it would vary in its position within your priority list depending on the conditions.
Exactly. So it could be number 2 or number 3 in your priority list. What you're looking at here is a very, very quick and dirty shelter. It's called a debris shelter. You want to walk us through it? What's in here, what you like about it, and what you don't like about it?
So this shelter, as Gino mentioned, is a debris shelter, and what we have here is just a basic frame, and it's the start of your debris shelter. So one of the first considerations would be the location. So the folks that had built this one chose a location between a natural stand of trees, which helped support them with the structure. And what they've done is they've stacked poles, and they've created an open space within the center here. It's obviously for someone very small, and you're not going to stretch out in here, so it could become kind of cramped, but it does provide decent shelter for you to curl up in colder weather. This might be a better option. As you start to build this, you'll notice that the poles, they're exceeding 45 degrees, and the reason for this is you need a minimum 45 degree angle on your poles to ensure your shelter is going to properly shed water.
John, what are you going to cover this with? What's the next step after they get the poles up?
So the next step to waterproof this and provide some insulation would be to cover that with debris, and that debris could be leaf litter in 3 seasons, or cedar boughs, or any sort of evergreen bough could be used to cover both the outside and provide an insulative layer on the ground for you to lie on top of. And in colder weather, you're going to need a minimum of 30 centimeters thick of cedar boughs underneath you to provide good insulation from the ground.
What's a drawback of this shelter here, in your opinion?
One of the drawbacks of this type of shelter is that it requires a significant amount of effort to collect the materials and to build. So you're going to be expending a lot of energy. If it's hot, you could be sweating, and you're going to become dehydrated if you're not drinking water while you put the effort into building this type of shelter.
If I had a tarp, I'd put up a tarp shelter. If you don't have a tarp, you may have to go with something like this, but as you mentioned, the amount of labor to collect all this material to put it together, and this is just a frame. Can you imagine harvesting the boughs? That's going to be an astronomical amount of work, but it'll keep you occupied, it'll keep you busy, it'll keep you from wandering all over the wilderness, thereby lowering your chances of wandering and keeping you centralized focus in one area. So it's keeping your mind occupied, because remember what we said before, boredom was one of the enemies of survival. Keeping you busy here will keep you focused and your mind sharp, so you're not delving and thinking terrible thoughts. Now, another disadvantage I see of this one here, for me, it's just too small. It's high, it's small, there's room for one. You could squeeze 2 people, but do you think you'd be able to spend a night with 2 people in there?
You'd be getting cramps, claustrophobic perhaps.
Right.
And if you're dehydrated, muscle cramps will be a real problem if you're not moving and stretching.
Exactly. We'll show you other types of shelter later on, very quick and dirty types, but this is a typical one that most books will espouse, this one here.
And one other quick thought, Gino, on this type of shelter. While you're gathering materials, because there is a lot of effort required, you want to start further away from your shelter as you begin, and work in concentric circles in towards the shelter itself.
Well, why? Why not start close by?
For a couple of reasons. First off, as you're starting, you're going to have more energy, and that will allow you to work further away from your shelter. As the day progresses and you become dehydrated and you become low on energy, you don't want to be going as far away from your shelter. You want to make sure that you're collecting closer to it so you're not expending as much energy. And also, you don't want to be too far away from your shelter once dark starts to set in. You want to be in your shelter with your fire going so you're not out wandering around and potentially getting lost again.
Exactly. Now, John, we call our book The Psychology of Wilderness Survival. And this is one of the psychological components: harvesting far away, keeping your mind occupied, keeping you stationary, keeping you from rambling into the wilderness. That is a key component of survival.